"The next person who can sing this Beethoven wins my hand in marriage," Clara Winthrop said, and the room laughed as if a glass of water had been tapped with a spoon. The laugh rippled, then vanished. Air vents hummed, forks clicked down. A heel stuttered once. Eli Hayes, night janitor with a mop handle warming his palm, heard the sentence slide across the hall toward the service door where he stood. "Don't," he told himself. "Not your world. Keep moving." But the old ache in his chest loosened like a knot when it rains. Maggie would have said, "You always say music is a kind of promise, Dad." Clara's voice carried again smooth for donors. "I'm kidding, friends." Though a little Beethoven wouldn't hurt. Polished tone, faint tremor, a keyhole letting in wind. He set the mop aside. The bucket wheels chirped. The gala chair droned auction lots, tax receipts. Eli stepped from the corridor and said, low but steady, "I'll sing, if everyone promises to listen past the first note." Silence steadied. A phone vibrated against linen. The sound found Clara. She turned toward it without moving. "Don't be foolish," she warned herself. "The last time risk and music linked arms, you bled for it." She set her glass down by sound a soft kiss of crystal. Eli didn't climb a stage. He let his breath fall to the quiet part of his body where grief slept. One breath, he reminded himself. From the ground up. He closed his eyes to hear better electricity in the wall's fabric whispering 100 hearts searching for tempo. Then he placed the note. It was not loud, not gala pretty. It carried a scratch the honest grain of a man who had held his tears straight through a night and survived his own voice. A single, open vowel with Beethoven's bones beneath it, a doorway you had to stoop to enter. The room tightened. A waiter halted. Ice clicked. He held the tone a heartbeat beyond comfort, then let it settle into a second note that softened the first. A woman near the front released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Clara's mind flashed a practice room at 16, a metronome's jaw, her mother's syllables over every mistake. "Don't flinch, Clara. Triumph, or don't come home." She inhaled the way her first teacher taught when her hands shook. He's not showing off, she realized. He's asking the room to tell the truth. Eli moved into a hidden fragment of Ode to Joy, letting the motif flicker rather than blaze. He felt his late wife's ring cool on the chain under his shirt touch his chest with each breath. "Stay with me, Lena." Just through this phrase. A whisper. "Is this planned?" Another voice shushed consonants sharp as a zipper. He stepped through the phrase anyway, trusting the same mathematics that had mended him on nights when Maggie woke coughing, and the only lullaby was a hymn at 2 a.m. Clara took one step forward. Her fingertip found the edge of a piano that hadn't been tuned all year. She didn't press a key. The dust smelled faintly chalky like rooms people stop believing in. "Say it," she urged herself, not with words, with listening. He emptied the phrase into quiet and let the hall hold it. For a second, the building chose elevator's side above. A panel of lights ticked. A guard's radio crackled low. The note nested in that machinery like a bird hiding in a refinery. Again, Clara heard herself say, "Not an order, a confession." Eli opened his eyes to the sound of her request hunger, not social. He nodded and returned to the motif, planting it deeper the way you revisit a grave in spring and press your palm to the name. A donor cleared his throat, impatience disguised as manners. "Ms. Winthrop," he stage-whispered the program. The word clanged like silverware. Clara didn't turn. She answered without a mic. "Take 1 minute with me. Just listen." Eli found the interval that hurt and healed in the same second. When he released it, you could hear the room decide whether to believe in being human together. A camera phone rose like a periscope. Another followed. The red record dots were quiet. He ended on a tone that didn't close the door. He left it ajar, inviting other breaths to step through. He waited. The hush had weight now. It pressed into shoulders and lifted chins, that paradox of silence that makes you stand taller. Clara's heart knocked twice, not with fear, but with recognition. She remembered why she'd stopped playing, how applause had become a demand instead of a response, how victory had sounded like metal. In this janitor's sound, she recognized the country she had fled, music that didn't ask to win anything. Sir, the gala chair tried smoothing a napkin, thank you, but Eli turned his head toward the voice body still. Just one more breath, he said, landing gently like a hand on a child's shoulder at bedtime. The chair swallowed his objection. He took the breath. Warm air after rain. The first vowel rose again, older, steadier, threaded with tenderness that startled even him. He felt he was borrowing the lungs of people who had lost someone and gone to work anyway. The motif returned smaller. No accompaniment, no flourish. He released the last note and let the hall answer. It didn't. Not with clapping, not yet. Only the held sound of people forgetting to perform what they were supposed to feel. A fork slid and kissed porcelain. Someone in the back exhaled like a tide letting go. Clara's breath caught a clean little gasp. For the first time all evening, she didn't know the next thing to say. And in that wide electric quiet, just as 100 minds leaned toward the question of what to do, a single ringtone began to rise. Faint at first, then clearer from a pocket near the front row. Beethoven. By morning, the building itself seemed to whisper. The hum of vents, the tick of pipes, everything held its breath. In the locker room, Eli's phone blinked again and again. He hesitated before unlocking it. 38 seconds. That's all the video was. The CEO jokes about marriage for Beethoven. The janitor answers with silence. The clip had gone everywhere overnight. Comments scrolled like rain-crying emojis, heart someone typing. That first note felt like my father talking to me again. Then, a familiar voice on speaker, Dad Maggie. "You're on the internet," she breathed. "Everyone says you made them cry." He smiled faintly. "Did I? You sounded like when you fix my breathing at night," she said softly. "Like you're telling the air it's safe." He listened to her inhale through the small plastic hiss of her inhaler. "I didn't mean to make a show magpie, I know. That's why it mattered." 40 floors above, Clara Winthrop sat in the boardroom surrounded by the buzz of panic. "We go," Positive PR said. "He's a symbol working-class soul meets corporate heart. A listening campaign. Ardent Dynamics hears you." Clara's tone was level. "We don't own that man's voice. Technically, legal counsel replied, shuffling papers, he was on our premises. Technically, she returned, he's a human being." The room went still for a beat. Then a voice from the speakerphone crackled, "Shape the narrative, Clara. Before someone else does." She exhaled slowly. "If we tell any story, it has to be true." "Then get the janitor on board," PR said. Today. Eli entered the glass room smelling faintly of lemon cleaner. Cameras waited like polite vultures behind the glass. PR smiled too wide. "Eli, your moment last night moved us all. Let's share it. Maybe a short video. Your story could inspire millions." He studied her. "You mean it could sell millions? We'll pay you generously," Legal added. Eli shook his head. "Keep your money. Fix the piano in the hall you're tearing down." That made Clara look up. "Who told you about Ardent Hall?" "No one," he said simply. "You can hear when a building's about to die. It goes quiet first." Something in her chest shifted. "I used to teach music," he said, voice lowering. "Before my wife got sick. If you want me, it's for the kids. No ads, no slogans, just breath and sound." Clara leaned forward. "What would you teach them that they don't have to perform to be heard?" PR blinked, unsure how to spin that. He stood ready to leave. "If that's not what you want, then this ends here." "Wait," Clara said. Her voice softened. "Give me 6 weeks. Let's try it your way." Later in the elevator, their reflections floated in the mirrored wall. "You said you used to teach," she said quietly. "Middle school choir," he answered, "and church sometimes. My wife said the silence between notes mattered most." Clara smiled faintly. I was supposed to be a pianist once. My mother timed my scales like laps. Music stopped being music. Maybe it can be again. The doors opened with a gentle sigh. Outside the lobby smelled of rain and burnt coffee. Clara's phone buzzed with a dozen alerts. She silenced them all. Ardent Hall's dark, now, she murmured. Technically condemned. Then let's start there, Eli said. Every voice deserves a place to echo. That evening, Maggie clambered into his car, backpack rattling. Dad, everyone at school saw you. Amelia said you made her cry in a good way. He chuckled. There's a good way to cry. She said it felt like hope. Her small hands twisted her inhaler cap. Are you famous now? No, he said. Just heard. Then use it, she urged. Help those kids nobody listens to. That's what Mom would want. The car hummed between them, steady as breath. Maybe you're right, he said. After dark, he found Clara waiting at the side entrance of Ardent Hall. No assistance. Just a key ring glinting in her hand. This door sticks, she warned. Then it still remembers being opened, he said. Metal clicked wood, groaned, and the smell of old dust and rain drifted out. Inside, their footsteps softened against the carpet. Lights, she asked. Let's listen first. The vast room breathed around them, empty but alive. He walked toward the piano by sound the hollow echo of the stage boards guiding him. His hand found the dust-covered lid. Cool. Still. Beneath the cloth, something pulsed faintly like a buried heartbeat waiting. Clara stood behind him, saying nothing. Eli whispered, If we do this, no pretending. No pretending, she promised. He folded back the cover. A puff of dust rose, shimmering in the dark. His fingers rested on the keys, cold and silent. For a long moment, the only sound was their breathing. Then one lone string sighed so soft it could have been imagined. Eli closed his eyes. That's the sound of something remembering it's alive. And in the hush that followed the story of their second chance, began to breathe. The building slept differently at night. The hum of the elevators was gone. Only the clock above the security desk ticked steady and alone. Eli Hayes pushed his cart through the marble hallway, the sound of the wheels echoing like faint applause. Inside Ardent Hall, the air smelled of dust and varnish, old memories. He set down his mop, rolled up his sleeves, and uncovered the piano again. His fingers brushed across the keys. Cold. Slightly out of tune. He plucked one string, gently adjusting a peg with a small wrench. The note twanged sharp, then settled. Better, he whispered. You're starting to remember who you were. He played a few hesitant chords, Beethoven's Shadow, quiet, imperfect. The sound filled the empty room like breath returning to a sleeping chest. He didn't hear Clara enter. Her heels had been left at the door. She crossed the wooden floor barefoot, listening. For the first time in years, she wasn't measuring rhythm or tone. She was simply hearing. That hall hasn't sung in years, she said softly. Eli turned surprised, but not startled. Maybe it was waiting for someone who'd listen. She gave a small wry smile. You make that sound easy. It's not, he said. Listening's the hardest part. You have to let silence tell you the truth. Clara folded her arms. You want to teach that to children? I want to remind them what quiet feels like. He played a few notes. Most kids today have never heard it. The kind of silence that doesn't judge you. She looked at him for a long moment, the soft light from the corridor outlining her face. You said we start with breath. Always Eli said. Music starts where breath begins. 3 nights later, the first class began. 8 children sat scattered in the room, uncertain and restless, some shy, some defiant. One boy, Carter, wore headphones around his neck but wouldn't look up. Eli knelt in front of him. You like music? The boy shrugged. What do you hear right now? Nothing. Then you're already listening, Eli said. That's a start. Clara stood at the back watching. She had expected chaos, but there was something strangely peaceful in the way Eli guided the group. He didn't command attention, he earned it by waiting. "Close your eyes," Eli said. "Everyone. Breathe in. Imagine you're blowing out birthday candles one at a time." The room filled with the soft rhythm of breath uneven, then gradually finding unity. Maggie sat on the stage beside her father, counting quietly. 1, 2, 3, rest. 1, 2, 3, rest. Eli smiled. "That's it. Now hum what you feel." Tiny voices wavered, then steadied. They weren't in tune, but they were alive. Clara pressed a hand against her chest. Something inside her shifted a door she hadn't realized she'd locked. She saw herself at 12, sitting at a piano bench under a teacher's frown, the word "perfect" stabbing into her shoulders. She whispered under her breath, "It was never supposed to hurt this much." Eli looked up. "What did you say?" She shook her head quickly. "Nothing." But he heard the tremor in her tone. "Music isn't about being good," he said. "It's about being honest. Kids understand that better than adults." After class, they sat on the edge of the stage while Maggie packed crayons and water bottles into her small tote. Clara exhaled. "You make this look easy." Eli chuckled. "It's not. It's messy, loud, unpredictable. But you can hear when a kid's heart opens. It's the same sound a string makes before it settles into tune." She nodded slowly. "I used to chase the opposite. Perfection. Perfection, he said, is just fear with a clean haircut." She laughed an honest laugh that startled even her. "You should write that down." "I just did," Eli said, tapping his temple. "Right here." 2 weeks passed. The little class began to feel like a family of mismatched notes learning to live in harmony. Maggie's laughter filled corners the building had forgotten. Carter started staying after sessions, curious about how sound worked. Clara found herself coming early just to sit and listen. But the peace was fragile. One afternoon, Eli found an email printed and left on the piano. No sender name, just corporate letterhead. Proposal terminate music program, non-essential expenditure. He folded it carefully, the paper crinkling like dry leaves. When Clara arrived that evening, he handed it to her without a word. She read it once, jaw tightening. "They went around me." "They're protecting what they understand," Eli said quietly. "Numbers, not notes." She sat beside him. "I promised 6 weeks. I'll fight for all of them." He looked at her. "You shouldn't have to fight alone." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Then stay." "I will," he said, and his voice had that steady timbre that made promises sound like prayers. They sat in silence until the clock on the wall chimed 11. The sound was gentle but final, like an unseen conductor closing a score. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Eli stayed behind. He opened the piano again and struck a single key. The sound trembled through the hall, pure, imperfect human. He thought of his wife's voice, of Maggie's laughter, of Clara's quiet determination. He thought of every child who had been told to be quiet when what they needed was to be heard. He closed his eyes. The note faded, leaving a silence so honest it almost hurt. Then, just as he started to leave, his phone buzzed on the bench. A message from an unknown sender. "Your little night classes are making waves. Let's talk before this gets out of control." Eli stared at the screen, heart beating slower than usual. The piano wire behind him let out a faint metallic sigh, almost like it understood, and the hall once again began to listen. The conference room felt colder than usual, too much glass, too much order. Outside, rain whispered against the windows like an audience holding its breath. Inside, a dozen faces stared at projections of numbers that seemed to drain the warmth out of the air. The community music program said the CFO, his pen tapping in perfect rhythm, is costing us more than it's giving back. No media traction, no investor buzz, no measurable ROI. He looked up, eyes sharp behind gold-rimmed glasses. "We're not running a charity, Clara." Clara sat straight, hands folded in her lap. "It's not a charity," she said calmly. "It's a heartbeat. And right now this company could use one." A few nervous chuckles scattered around the table, but the CFO didn't flinch. "You know what's ironic," he said. "People loved that Janitor video. That could have been our turning point if you'd let us brand it. Instead, you're protecting a man who refuses to play along." Eli, who'd been invited only to observe, sat in the back corner, still in his work uniform. He had been silent until now, but something inside him stirred at the word brand. "Music isn't a logo," he said quietly. Heads turned. The CFO smiled thinly. "Forgive me, Mr. Hayes, but this is a business conversation." Then maybe Eli said, voice steady, "That's the problem. You keep trying to sell what can't be sold." The silence that followed was sharper than any argument. Clara didn't move. Her gaze flicked to Eli, thankful, terrified. The chairman coughed, breaking the tension. "Let's not get sentimental. We're here to decide if this pilot continues or not." Clara inhaled slow and deep. "Before we vote," she said, "I'm proposing a gala one night to show what this is really about. No ads, no filters, just the music. Let the results speak." The CFO sighed. "And if it fails, then you can cut every dollar," she said. "But if it works, if people see what I see, then we keep the program and we build on it." The chairman leaned back. "You're staking your credibility on this." "I'm staking something more important," she said. "Our humanity." A long pause. Then grudgingly, "Mida, you have 1 month." That evening, Clara found Eli in Ardent Hall rewiring the old stage lights. "They gave us a month," she said. I heard he murmured, tightening a bolt. "And a noose." She smiled faintly. "I was thinking of calling it a gala. Gala noose, it all depends on the audience." He wiped his hands, then looked at her. "If we do this, the kids go first. Their voices their way. No costumes, no scripts." "Agreed." And the finale, she added hesitantly, "I'd like you to sing with me." He froze, wrenched midair. "That's not a good idea." "Why not?" "Because I don't sing to prove things," he said. "And you don't need saving." Her eyes softened. "It's not about saving. It's about sharing." Eli exhaled, shoulders easing. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Maybe not," she admitted. "But I know what it sounds like when someone sings from truth, and I think the world could use that again." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "If we do it raw. No orchestra, just breath and piano. Then we'll breathe together," she said quietly. The rehearsals began after midnight. The hall came alive again, laughter coughing the occasional wrong note that made everyone smile. Eli sat beside Clara at the piano, teaching her to release her breath, not control it. "Close your eyes," he said. "Feel where your ribs end. That's where your voice starts." She followed, hesitating. The note that came out was thin, trembling. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Don't force it. You're not fighting the air, you're inviting it." She tried again. The sound grew warmer, fuller. Her fingers brushed the keys, and for a moment she forgot about shareholders and headlines. He smiled. "There. That's you. Not the CEO. Just Clara." She met his eyes, the smallest laugh escaping her lips. "You make it sound like confession." "Sometimes it is." But outside the hall, the whispers grew louder. A new article hit the company's internal forum, "The Janitor Who Charmed the CEO Behind Ardent's Latest Stunt." The headline stung like glass. The photo beneath it showed Eli and Clara side by side at the piano, both mid-laugh. The caption, "Intimate rehearsals or corporate theater." When she saw it, Clara's heart dropped. That night she found Eli tuning the piano again. He looked up, saw the article open on her phone, and sighed. "Let me guess," he said. "They found a new way to misunderstand." She nodded. "They think you're manipulating me." He gave a quiet, humorless smile. "If I were, I'd ask for a raise." Her voice wavered. "I'm sorry, Eli." "Don't be. They're afraid of anything real." He looked at her eyes, gentle. Let them write what they want. We'll give them truth they can't edit." She swallowed hard. "Promise me something. Name it. Don't stop believing this matters. Even if I do." He didn't answer right away. He just nodded, then pressed one key on the piano, soft, sustained, pure. "That," he said, "is my promise." When he left later that night, the marble hallway reflected his footsteps, steady, unhurried. But overhead, a single crack had appeared in the ceiling near the conference floor. It spread slowly, almost invisibly, running the length of the corridor like a quiet reminder. Even marble breaks when it forgets how to listen. The night air inside Ardent Hall was thick with the smell of polish and old wood. Eli Hayes sat alone at the piano, eyes closed, hands motionless on the keys. He wasn't playing, he was remembering. In the half-light, the hum of the air vents turned into a low, rhythmic pulse. Somewhere far away, a memory stirred the beep of a hospital monitor, his wife's shallow breath the sound of a nurse whispering his name. "Mr. Hayes. She's tired now." He could still hear his reply, rough and breaking. "She hasn't sung her last note yet." But she had. The piano key under his hand trembled faintly as if echoing that breath. He whispered to the darkness, "I stopped singing that day. Maybe I stopped breathing too." The door creaked open. Clara stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. The smell drifted forward, bittersweet and human. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she said. Eli smiled weakly. "I tried." The silence got loud. She sat beside him, setting 1 cup down. "I know that sound." "You do?" "When I was 16, my mother entered me in the National Youth Piano Competition," Clara said quietly. "I played Beethoven's Sonata No. 14. Everyone clapped, but my mother leaned in and said, 'It wasn't perfect.'" She laughed softly without joy. "That was the night I stopped hearing the music. All I heard was the ticking of her watch." Eli studied her face lit by the piano lamp. "You turned your pain into armor. And you turned yours into silence," she said gently. He nodded. Different instruments. Same song. For a while they just sat there, 2 ghosts learning how to breathe again. The next afternoon the children filed in loud, laughing, spilling backpacks everywhere. But one boy, Carter, lingered near the door. He tugged at Eli's sleeve. "Mr. Hayes, can we turn off the lights today?" The lights, Eli asked. "I sing better in the dark," Carter whispered. "Feels like no one's watching." Eli nodded. "You just taught me something, kid." He dimmed the lights. The room sank into a warm dusk. "All right, everyone," he said. "Today we sing with our eyes closed. Let the dark tell you where your voice lives." A small giggle broke out, then a hush. The children began humming awkward at first, then together. Their notes drifted like small lanterns glowing against the dark. Clara stood by the doorway, tears gathering silently. It wasn't the perfection that moved her. It was the courage. After the session, she whispered to Eli, "You just turned fear into harmony." He smiled. Music does that. It lets the broken parts talk to each other. Later that evening, a new email from PR arrived in Clara's inbox. The subject line read, "Urgent Gala Direction Adjustment." She opened it and sighed. "We suggest increasing visual impact stage lighting costumes and a celebrity host. The story sells better if it sparkles." She called Eli immediately. "They want spectacle," she said. "They think the kids need to shine brighter." Eli's voice came through steady but cold. "They already do. You just can't see light when you stare at the bulbs instead of the faces." She sighed. "If we don't meet their expectations, they'll cancel the funding." He paused. "Then we'll make something they can't measure." "What do you mean? No props? No fireworks? Just voices. Breath is enough. Breath." He nodded. "It's the first sound we ever make and the last we leave behind. Everything in between is music." She stared at him, speechless. "You really believe this can work? I believe it's the only thing that will. But hope is fragile." The following week, as rehearsals grew longer and the gala drew near, Maggie began to cough again, dry, insistent, like a warning. "Dad." "I'm fine," she said, clutching her inhaler. Eli crouched beside her, his hands trembling. "You pushed too hard tonight." "I just wanted to help," she whispered. "You said music helps people heal." "It does," he said, voice breaking. "But you don't have to save anyone. You already did." That night her breathing worsened. The sound of it filled his small apartment, the uneven rhythm, the rasp. It was the same fear that had once stolen his wife. He called Clara. "She can't breathe right. I'm taking her to the hospital." "I'm on my way," Clara said, already grabbing her coat. Hours later, in the sterile glow of the ER, Eli sat beside Maggie's bed, her small hand tangled in his. Machines beeped a slow, patient rhythm. Clara arrived, quietly placing a warm cup of coffee next to him. "How is she?" "The doctor said it's under control," he whispered. "Just exhaustion." He rubbed his eyes. "I shouldn't have let her help so much. She was so proud." Clara touched his shoulder gently. "You're a father who gave her purpose. Don't confuse love with guilt." He looked up, eyes raw. "You sound like you've practiced that line." "I've lived it," she said. "Every time I chose work over living." Silence settled between them again, heavy but honest. Eli stared at the rise and fall of his daughter's chest. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe the gala isn't worth it. Clara shook her head slowly. "No, Eli. Maybe this is the reason it matters." He turned to her. "You really think music can heal all this I don't know," she admitted. "But I think you can." He met her gaze, and for the first time since his wife's death, the ache in his chest didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a pulse. Outside, the night was quiet. The hospital doors hissed open to the cool Boston air. Clara walked beside him in silence until she said softly, "If we do this gala, we don't perform. We heal." Eli looked at her eyes, tired but alive. "Then let's heal." He took a deep breath, the kind that begins a song, and for the first time in years, it didn't hurt. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fatigue. Machines whispered in rhythm, tracing the shape of a small girl's breath. Maggie lay asleep, her tiny hand wrapped around her father's thumb like an anchor. Eli sat motionless beside her bed, eyes, red knuckles white. Clara stood quietly by the door, unsure if she should speak. The only sound between them was the soft hiss of the oxygen line. Finally, he broke the silence. "Every time I start to believe in something again, life reminds me I shouldn't." Clara walked closer, voice low. "Maybe life isn't reminding you, it's testing you. Seeing if you'll stop halfway again." He looked up sharply. "You think this is a test, I think healing always is." He stared at his daughter's fragile chest rising and falling. "I thought music could fix things. I thought if I gave her a purpose, she'd be safe." Clara's tone softened. "You gave her what she needed, something to hold on to. That's what music does. It keeps us breathing." He shook his head. "I can't do the gala. Not while she's like this." Clara sat on the edge of the chair beside him. "Then don't do it for the board or for me. Do it for her, for every breath she fights to take." Eli didn't answer, but when he looked at Maggie again, his jaw tightened, not in anger, but resolve. 2 days later, Maggie was stable enough to go home. Clara insisted on driving them. The car ride was quiet, just the steady hum of the tires and the faint buzz of rain against the windshield. From the back seat, Maggie whispered, "Dad." "Did I ruin the concert?" Eli's voice cracked. "You could never ruin anything that starts with your heart, sweetheart." Clara met his eyes briefly in the mirror, her gaze full of unspoken warmth. Back at Ardent Hall that night, the building felt different, lighter somehow. When Eli unlocked the door, the hinges didn't groan as they usually did. It was as if the place itself was waiting for their return. He flicked on a single lamp near the piano. The light touched the room like dawn easing through a storm. Clara placed her coat over a chair. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "No," Eli said, smiling faintly. "But I think that's what makes it real." He turned toward her. "You said something in the hospital. About healing. You still believe that?" She nodded. "It's the only thing left worth believing." "Then let's prove it." They began rebuilding the program in silence. No fancy staging, no PR teams, no choreographers, just two adults and a group of kids who sang like they were mending something invisible. Eli led them through the opening lines of Ode to Joy, his voice low, almost speaking, joy bright spark of divinity. The children joined in unsteady but sincere. The notes floated unevenly, bumping into one another until they began to find rhythm breath syncing like shared heartbeat. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of sound vibrate through the floorboards. It wasn't beautiful, it was alive. After a while, Eli stopped them. "That's it. Now again, but this time, don't sing to impress. Sing to forgive." "Forgive," who Maggie asked, holding her inhaler like a small microphone. "Anyone you've been angry at, including yourself." The room went quiet for a beat. Then the first note rose raw and trembling like a secret finally spoken aloud. Clara caught her breath. It wasn't the pitch that moved her, it was the truth in it. She whispered almost to herself, "That's what healing sounds like." Eli nodded. "Don't perform," he said softly. "Heal." Over the next week, they rehearsed the piece entirely in the dark. Eli turned off all lights except one dim lamp by the piano. "When we sing in darkness," he told them, "we learn to hear the light." Clara stood beside him, guiding the students gently, her once corporate voice now soft and human. When a boy missed a note, she didn't correct him. She just said, "Try again until it feels like truth." Eli watched her quietly astonished. "You're different," he murmured when the kids left one night. "So are you," she replied. "Maybe we're just finally who we were supposed to be." Their eyes met in the lamplight, steady searching, wordless. The silence between them felt sacred, like a held note that refused to fade. But not everyone shared their peace. One evening, as they were packing up, the main lights flickered. Clara frowned. "That's strange." Eli tapped the switchboard. "Probably just old wiring." The next morning, she found a memo on her desk, "Unauthorized power usage detected at Ardent Hall after business hours. If this continues, electrical service will be temporarily disabled for safety compliance." At the bottom, a handwritten note in red ink, "If your gala fails, we pull the plug for good." Clara's stomach turned cold. That evening, she walked into the hall, the memo still in her hand. "Eli," she said, voice trembling slightly, "someone on the board is threatening to cut power during the event." He looked up from the piano, unshaken. "Then we'll keep singing when the lights go out." She stared at him, incredulous. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," he said, a small smile forming. "Light isn't what lets people see us, Clara. It's what happens when they finally listen." For a moment, the only sound was the faint ringing of a piano string still vibrating from his last chord. Clara set the memo down beside him. "You realize if they really do it, it could ruin everything." He shook his head. "No, it might save it." She looked at him, seeing not the janitor who once mopped her hallways, but a man who had quietly taught her what it meant to live with both pain and grace. "All right," she whispered. "If the lights go out, we don't stop." He smiled, a quiet promise beneath his breath. "Then it'll be the most honest concert this company has ever seen." And as the piano hummed under his touch, the hall filled with a silence so charged it sounded like faith waiting to be tested. Rain tapped gently on the glass canopy outside Ardent Dynamics as guests in tuxedos and gowns arrived, their laughter echoing like tiny cymbals in the night air. Inside, the main hall glowed with chandeliers and nervous expectation. The gala had begun. Clara Winthrop stood backstage, her palms cold despite the warmth of the lights. She could hear the murmur of the crowd, investors, reporters, executives, all waiting to see whether her experiment in listening would save her company or destroy it. Behind her, Eli adjusted a microphone that wasn't even plugged in. He caught her glance and smiled faintly. Still time to run, he teased. She managed a breathy laugh. "You first." He shook his head. "I've spent too many years running from sound. Tonight, I think I'll stay." The children huddled together near the wings, whispering and fidgeting. Maggie stood front and center, clutching her inhaler in one hand and the hem of her dress in the other. Eli knelt down to meet her eyes. "Remember what we talked about?" he said softly. "You're not performing. You're healing with every note." She nodded. "And if I forget the words?" "Then hum," he said. "Sometimes humming says more than words ever could." Clara watched them, her heart heavy with something she couldn't name. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was both. When Eli straightened, she leaned closer and whispered, "Whatever happens, thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me that music isn't about control." He smiled. "Then let's lose it together." The lights dimmed. The murmuring audience faded into a hush. Clara stepped out, first her heels quiet against the stage. "Good evening," she began. Her voice trembled just enough to sound human. "Tonight isn't about perfection. It's about listening to each other and to what's been too long unheard." Applause rippled gently. She stepped aside. Eli walked out, the janitor's badge still clipped to his belt, and the room seemed to hold its breath. He raised his hand. "We're not here to perform," he said, his voice steady but low. "We're here to remember what it feels like to breathe together." A child began the first soft hum of Ode to Joy, then another, then another. The harmony rose like a tide, fragile, hesitant, beautiful. And then the lights went out. Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone cursed under their breath. The stage was swallowed in darkness. For a heartbeat, it felt like failure. Then Eli's voice cut through the black "Stay with me." A single note, pure, deep and sure, rose from the void. His baritone filled the hall like a heartbeat rediscovered. Clara joined him, her voice trembling but brave. One by one, the children followed their small voices, threading through the dark. The sound grew not louder but deeper, like something ancient remembering itself. Then it happened. One audience member, fumbling for a phone, turned on the flashlight. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the hall shimmered in thousands of soft white beams, tiny constellations of human light. Faces glowed in reflection, tears shining like glass. Maggie's voice, clear and high, rose above them all, Alle Menschen werden Brüder. Every heart in the room understood, even if not every ear knew the words. Clara's breath hitched. The glow of the phones painted her face silver. She glanced toward Eli, who sang as if he were holding the world steady with sound. For a moment, she forgot the board, the cameras, the stakes. There was only this darkness, light, and the miracle of people choosing to listen. The song reached its final refrain. Eli lowered his voice to a whisper of melody, and the children followed until only Clara's faint soprano lingered, a note trembling on the edge of silence. Then quiet. Real quiet. It wasn't the silence of awkwardness or confusion, it was the kind that hums with reverence, the kind that feels alive. No one clapped at first. The audience simply sat there, glowing phones raised as if afraid to break the moment. Then one child giggled nervously. Another followed. And suddenly applause burst like a storm, raw, loud, unstoppable. People stood crying, cheering, reaching for each other. Clara stood motionless, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Eli stepped beside her, voice barely audible beneath the roar. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did it." He smiled. "No." They did. He nodded toward the crowd, toward every face lit not by stage light but by the small mercy of their own glow. Backstage, the children hugged each other, laughter ringing through the corridor like bells. Maggie ran into her father's arms. "Dad, the lights went out, and no one stopped singing." It worked. He kissed the top of her head. That's because real music doesn't need permission to shine. Across the hall, Clara stood against the wall watching them. One of the PR managers rushed toward her, face flushed. The video's everywhere. People are calling it the night of 1,000 phones. You just saved the company. Clara didn't even look at her. Her eyes were still on the stage door. No, she said softly. We just remembered what it means to be alive. Later that night, after the crowd had gone and the lights were fixed, Eli returned to the now quiet hall. The smell of applause still lingered in the air, warm and electric. Clara joined him. I don't think I've ever heard silence sound so beautiful, she said. He chuckled softly. That's because it's not silence. It's peace. They stood together listening. Then, far in the distance, a faint click. The stage lights blinked back on, flickering uncertainly. Clara frowned. Power's back. Eli looked up toward the balcony where a shadow moved, quick, deliberate, slipping away. He felt the hair rise on his neck. Someone turned them off on purpose, he said quietly. Clara's voice hardened. Then, tomorrow we'll find out who. But tonight, no one could steal the light they had created. And, as they stood beneath the ceiling where echoes still shimmered, Eli whispered the words that would stay with her forever. Sometimes, Clara. The world has to go dark before it remembers how to listen. The morning after the gala, the city felt different, quieter, lighter, as if Boston itself was still holding the echo of that night. Eli stepped out of his apartment into the cool dawn, coffee in hand. His phone buzzed endlessly in his pocket, messages from numbers he didn't know, reporters, strangers, teachers, old students. He ignored them all. At the end of the street, a busker played a violin piece from Ode to Joy. People actually stopped to listen. Eli smiled. Maybe they finally heard it, he thought. At Ardent headquarters, the boardroom looked like a storm after calm seas. The PR director was radiant, practically vibrating. Clara, it's everywhere, she said, waving her tablet. The night of 1,000 phones top trending across every platform. We've got networks calling. Donations are flooding in. The whole country's talking about Ardent as a symbol of hope. Clara stood by the window, coffee untouched. Hope, she said quietly. That's a first. Congratulations, said the chairman, entering with a slow clap. You gambled the company's image on a janitor and some children. Against all logic, you won. His words should have felt like victory, but they didn't. Clara turned toward him. We didn't win, Mr. Raines. We remembered. He smiled thinly. Beautiful sentiment. But remember, sentiment doesn't balance books. Then he placed a folder on the table paper, crisp and white. By the way, we traced the outage last night. Internal sabotage. She froze. Who? He looked at her meaningfully. Someone wanted your experiment to fail. One of our own. Clara's pulse quickened. You're saying I'm saying the story can still turn, and if it does, we'll need a scapegoat. He left before she could reply. That afternoon, the headlines shifted. Power cut during Ardent Gala. Was it a PR stunt? Janitor hero or hidden manipulator? Eli read the articles while wiping down the piano. His chest tightened not with anger but with weary recognition. He'd been here before, praised one day, forgotten the next. When Clara arrived, she looked, pale eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. They're saying you planned the blackout, she said quietly. Eli didn't look up. Of course they are. You could deny it publicly. I'll call a press conference. He shook his head. That'll only make it louder. They're attacking your integrity. He smiled faintly. If I start defending it, they'll say I'm performing again. Clara's voice trembled. You don't deserve this. He finally met her gaze. Neither did my wife. But life doesn't grade on fairness. She swallowed hard. Then let me take the fall. I was the one who insisted on doing this. No, he said firmly. You built something worth keeping. Don't trade it for guilt. Her voice broke. Eli, you don't understand. If this scandal grows, they'll force me out. He stood walking toward her. Then go out with truth. It's the only thing that'll follow you home. She looked at him as if memorizing his face. You'd really let them ruin your name to protect mine. He smiled, weary but soft. Names are just words. You gave those kids music. The next day, Clara called a press conference in the same glass atrium where it had all begun. The cameras waited like hungry eyes. She stepped to the microphone. The noise quieted instantly. I know there are questions, she began. Questions about who caused the power outage during our gala. You deserve honesty. She paused, her breath catching. If anyone is to be held responsible, it's me. I approved the event. I believed in the message, and I still do. Reporters shouted questions, flashes bursting. Clara raised a hand. But before you ask, why let me say this when the lights went out, the people didn't stop singing? That's not manipulation. That's humanity. If we can't celebrate that, then maybe we've forgotten what business we're really in. The hall erupted in applause. Cameras clicked furiously. Eli, watching from the edge of the crowd, felt something twist in his chest, pride, fear, gratitude all at once. That night, after everyone had gone home, he returned to Ardent Hall. The building was dim, bathed in leftover light from street lamps. Maggie sat on the piano bench, swinging her legs. "Daddy," they said on TV, "you're famous." He laughed softly. "Famous is just when people remember your name for a day." She looked at him seriously. "But I'll remember your songs forever." Her words hit deeper than she could know. He reached out and brushed her hair back. "That's all I ever wanted." A knock echoed from the doorway. Clara stepped in, holding a folder. "You've got an offer," she said. "They want you full-time director of community music initiatives. Salary, benefits, everything." He blinked. "Me? That's a real job." "It's your job," she said simply. He hesitated. "I'm not sure I can stop being the janitor." Clara tilted her head. "Why not?" He smiled faintly. "Because the janitor still listens to the walls." Her laughter was soft, tired, genuine. "Then bring your mop. We could use a little humility upstairs." He chuckled, then grew quiet. "You'll still be here." Her expression faltered. "I'm not sure. The board's meeting tomorrow to review leadership direction." He looked down, the weight of her words settling like dust. "They'll never understand what you did." She sighed. Maybe they don't need to. Maybe they just need to hear it. At the doorway, she turned back one last time. "Eli," she said, "whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for teaching me to breathe again." He gave a small, warm smile. "Don't thank me yet." "Why not?" "Because breath is only the beginning." Later, after she left, Eli stood alone in the hall. He hung his janitor's badge on a nail near the piano, a quiet symbol of everything he'd been and everything he still was. He touched one key, low, resonant, hopeful. The note lingered in the dark, neither sad nor triumphant, just alive. And for the first time in years, he didn't wish for applause. He wished for peace. Ardent Hall was supposed to be gone by now. The demolition trucks had been scheduled, the paperwork signed, but the city never came. Instead, scaffolding surrounded the old building like an embrace. Inside, the air smelled of sawdust and promise. Eli Hayes stood in the middle of the room holding a rolled blueprint. His hands were smudged with graphite, his shirt sleeves pushed high. Clara Winthrop stepped in quietly, her heels clicking against the unfinished floor. "You're here early," she said. He smiled without looking up. "This place doesn't know how to sleep anymore." She walked toward him, scanning the plans spread out on a wooden table. "The Hayes Winthrop Center for Listening Arts," she read softly. "Still feels strange seeing our names side by side." "Feels right to me," he said. "You gave it the second chance." "I just swept the floor." "You did more than that," she said, voice gentle. "You built something that listens back." He chuckled. "Buildings don't listen, Clara." "People do." She shook her head. "Then you haven't heard what this one sounds like." Maggie ran in, carrying a bundle of paper. Dad, look, she said, spreading her drawing across the table. A simple logo, 2 curved lines forming the shape of an ear that blossomed into a leaf. Clara knelt beside her. That's beautiful, Maggie. What's it mean? It means, when you listen, Maggie said proudly, things grow. Eli swallowed hard. I think we just found our logo. He turned to Clara. You'll make a speech at the opening. She hesitated. I'd rather let the play speak for itself. He studied her. You're really leaving, aren't you? She looked down. The board wants new leadership. Someone less emotional. Less human, you mean? She gave a small, weary laugh. They said I blurred the line between business and belief. Maybe that's the only line worth blurring, he said. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of a hammer striking somewhere in the hall filled the silence like a metronome keeping time with their thoughts. 2 weeks later, the center opened. The day smelled of fresh paint and spring air. Parents, teachers, and children filled the courtyard, voices blending in soft, hopeful chaos. Inside, the rooms glowed with quiet purpose. One had soundproof walls for children who needed silence more than music. Another was lined with soft fabric panels where kids could touch vibration instead of hearing it. And at the heart of it all stood the hall restored alive, humming faintly even before the first note. Eli adjusted his tie nervously. I don't belong in this thing, he muttered. Clara smiled. You built it. That's belonging enough. The mayor took the stage delivering his rehearsed lines about innovation, community, and healing. But the real moment came when Eli stepped forward to speak. He looked out at the crowd, his voice calm, grounded. This place isn't about music, he began. It's about listening. Somewhere along the way, we started confusing noise with connection. This center exists to remind us what it sounds like when someone truly hears you. He glanced toward Maggie. My daughter taught me that every breath counts. This place is for anyone who's ever felt their song go unheard. The audience was silent, listening exactly as he'd asked. When he finished, the applause was quiet at first, then swelled into something raw and real. Clara clapped from the back, tears threatening to spill. Later that evening, when the crowd had gone, they stood alone in the main hall. The sunset bled through the tall windows, painting the floor gold. Eli unpinned his janitor's badge and hung it on a nail beside the piano like a medal, not a relic. Keeping it there reminds me where this started, he said. She nodded. You could have thrown it away. He smiled faintly. It's hard to throw away the thing that taught you to be humble. Clara walked around the hall, slowly trailing her fingertips along the wall. It feels different now, like it's breathing. It is, Eli said. It finally has lungs again. She laughed softly. You're poetic when you're tired. I'm poetic when I remember. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, an email arrived from the board. Clara read it alone in her office. The subject line was short and merciless. Leadership transition vote, effective immediately. She stared at the words for a long time, her throat tightening. Her phone buzzed a message from Eli. The new center's roof leaks when it rains. Thought you'd want to hear it first? She smiled sadly. He still calls me before he calls maintenance. Then the second buzz came, this time from her assistant. Investor. Majority supports leadership change. They want you to step down by Friday. Clara sat back in her chair. Outside, she could hear the construction crew singing softly as they worked, their voices faint but steady. For the first time, the thought of losing her title didn't feel like failure. It felt like freedom knocking quietly. That evening, she drove to the center. Eli was still there cleaning the floors, even though it wasn't his job anymore. You don't have to do that, she said. He looked up, smiling. Old habits. She held out her phone, showing him the email. They're replacing me. He studied her face carefully. You okay? I think so, she said after a pause. It hurts, but maybe this is what staying really looks like. He nodded. You taught them to listen, Clara. You just can't choose what they do with the silence after. She blinked back tears. What if everything I built gets twisted again? He leaned on the mop handle, thoughtful. Then we build again. That's what music does, it repeats until it heals. They stood in the fading light, the sound of children's laughter echoing faintly from somewhere down the corridor. The world outside was changing, but here inside these walls something sacred had been born, and neither of them could undo it. Clara smiled faintly. You once told me that buildings don't listen. He gestured around. I was wrong. This one does. It listens to whoever needs to be heard. As she turned to leave, he called after her, his voice low and full of warmth. Don't forget, he said. The light stays even when we don't. She stopped at the doorway, her silhouette framed in the dim glow. Then, promise me you'll keep it burning. I already am, he said. And when she walked away, the sound of her heels faded into the kind of silence that feels like love choosing to stay behind. The boardroom smelled faintly of paper and fear. The long mahogany table gleamed under the morning lights, but no one looked up long enough to notice. The air was heavy, one of those mornings when everyone knows something irreversible is about to happen. Clara Winthrop sat at the head of the table, her notes stacked neatly, her pulse steady only because she willed it to be. Across from her sat 12 directors' faces carved in corporate calm. The chairman began. Ms. Winthrop, this isn't personal. The company is moving in a new direction. Clara smiled faintly. Everything is personal when it involves people. He cleared his throat. We've reviewed your leadership. While your initiatives have improved public sentiment, they've also, how should I put this, diluted our focus on profit. Profit, she repeated softly. That's what we call it when something stops having a soul. The CFO leaned forward. You can't run a corporation on poetry, Clara. No, she said, but you can run one on purpose. The chairman exhaled. Let's stay professional. The vote will proceed this afternoon. She nodded slowly. Then, before you decide who should lead this company, let me remind you why we lead anything at all. An hour later, the press gathered in the atrium, microphones, cameras, lights burning white. Clara stood behind the podium where months ago a janitor had sung the note that changed everything. She adjusted the mic. The murmurs died down. Good afternoon, she began. By now, you've heard the rumors. The board is reviewing my position. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because I believe in what last night proved people don't come to be impressed. They come to belong. The crowd hushed. Even the cameras seemed to lean in. Some will say we lost sight of business, she continued. But maybe business lost sight of us first. Maybe we've been chasing numbers so long that we forgot what it sounds like when hearts align in harmony. She paused, searching for her next words not in her mind, but in her chest. If you ask me what I choose to stay for, she said softly, it's not titles or headlines. I stay for the single mother who works 2 jobs and still hums to her child at night. For the janitor who taught us that silence can be music. For a city that's learning to listen again. Her voice wavered not from weakness but from truth. And if that costs me my chair, so be it. But I won't trade compassion for compliance. The audience rose in quiet applause. It wasn't thunderous, it was reverent, the kind that feels earned. Outside the building, a small crowd had gathered. Parents, children, teachers, the same kids from the Listening Arts Center. They held hand-painted signs, Keep Clara and Let Music Stay. As Clara stepped out, the children began to sing. It was rough and imperfect, but it carried more conviction than any speech. Ode to Joy, she recognized instantly the melody that had changed her fate twice now. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Eli stood at the back of the group, hands in his pockets, watching her with quiet pride. When their eyes met, it was as if the noise of the city dissolved, leaving only that silent conversation between them, the kind built on everything unspoken. When the song ended, he stepped forward. You once told me you didn't know why you were still here, he said softly. Now you do. She smiled through her tears. You think so, I know, so he said. You stayed long enough to teach the rest of us how." That evening, the board convened. The vote began at exactly 6 p.m. Clara wasn't present. She was at the listening center walking through the halls she'd helped rebuild. Each room echoed faintly with life, a child laughing a note held too long, a teacher clapping time. Her phone buzzed, a text from Eli. "Whatever they decide, the music doesn't stop." She typed back, "Then we've already won." As she reached the main hall, she heard a faint melody. Eli's voice, soft, steady singing as he worked. She leaned against the doorway, listening. "Didn't expect an audience," he said without turning around. "I'm learning to listen quietly," she replied. He chuckled. "You're getting good at it." She walked toward him. "You told me once that every building breathes if you stand still long enough. What does this one sound like now?" He rested his hand on the piano, listening. "Like forgiveness," he said. "And beginnings." Clara let out a long, shaky breath. "They're voting as we speak." "I know. You don't even want to ask how it's going." He smiled. "If the world can hear what you just said today, it doesn't matter what 12 people decide in one room." She laughed quietly. "You always know how to turn ruin into reason." "That's the trick," he said. "We don't choose what breaks us. We only choose what we stay for." The room fell into a soft, golden hush, the kind of quiet that feels earned, not empty. Outside, a storm rolled across the city, thunder humming low like a bass note under the world. The rain began to patter against the glass windows, steady and sure. Clara turned toward the sound. "Funny," she murmured. "Even the sky's applauding." Eli grinned. "Maybe it just likes your speech." Their laughter overlapped gentle, unguarded healing. A phone buzzed on the piano. Clara froze. Eli picked it up and handed it to her. The screen glowed. Board vote concluded. Her thumb hovered over the message. She didn't open it. Eli studied her quietly. "You don't have to look yet." She nodded, setting the phone face down. "Whatever it says, I already know who I am." He met her eyes. "Then you've already won more than a title." The rain outside grew heavier, but the hall felt warm, filled with that invisible music that only courage can make. As the thunder faded into distance, the two of them stood side by side, neither speaking. When Clara finally whispered, "Thank you," it wasn't a farewell. It was a beginning. The verdict came at sunrise. Clara Winthrop sat alone in her apartment, the pale Boston light spilling through the blinds. Her phone buzzed once on the kitchen table, then stilled. She didn't need to open the message to know. When she finally did, the words were short: "Board decision confirmed. Transition effective immediately." She exhaled slowly, no tears, no shock. Just the quiet acceptance of someone who had already made peace. For the first time in years, she wasn't late for a meeting. She didn't have to rehearse strength. She simply sat and listened to the sound of her own breathing, steady and human. By mid-morning, she was at the Listening Arts Center. The building hummed with life children's footsteps, laughter echoing down the halls, a faint piano chord from the main room. Eli was there, sleeves rolled, fixing a broken microphone stand. When he saw her, he smiled with that quiet understanding she had come to trust. "They made it official," she said, leaning on the doorway. He nodded. "I guessed as much. I'm no longer CEO." "Good," he said simply. "Now you can get back to being human." She laughed softly. "You always know what to say." "It's the only thing I'm good at," he teased, then added more gently, "What will you do now?" Clara looked around at the hall, the children learning to breathe the walls that vibrated with music and memory. "I'm not leaving this place. I just need a different way to stay." He tilted his head. Different, how she smiled faintly. "I spoke with the city. They want to start a foundation, the Listening Arts Fund. I told them I'd run it. Less power, more purpose." Eli's grin spread slowly. "So you're not walking away. You're walking home." "Exactly." He stepped closer, eyes soft. "I'm proud of you, Clara." She looked down, smiling. Funny thing is, I think I'm finally proud of me, too. That afternoon, the center hosted a small community concert, their first since the gala. The hall filled with neighbors, teachers, and families who had once only passed each other in silence. Eli tuned the piano one last time. Maggie darted between rows, arranging chairs that were already perfectly straight. "Dad," she said seriously, "you're singing today, right?" He raised an eyebrow. "Who told you that?" "Miss Clara," she said, grinning. "She said the world's been waiting for your encore." He chuckled, shaking his head. "She says things like that to get people in trouble. She says things like that to get people brave," Maggie corrected. When the lights dimmed, the audience quieted. Clara took the stage not in a designer suit, but in a simple navy dress. "Welcome," she said. Voice calm and bright. "This isn't a performance. It's a thank you for everyone who believed that music could make us more than what we were yesterday." She turned toward Eli, sitting at the piano. "And this next piece," she said, "is for the man who reminded us that listening is the purest form of love." He looked up, half smiling, half humbled. "You should have warned me." "Where's the fun in that?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, then silence the kind that asks to be filled. Eli's fingers found the opening notes of Ode to Joy, but this time it wasn't grand or operatic. It was tender, stripped down to breath and truth. Clara joined in quietly, her voice weaving around his like two threads meant to meet at last. Their harmony carried through the hall, warm, human, imperfect, perfect. When the children's voices joined them, the sound expanded until it filled every corner. The audience didn't clap. They just listened, smiling through tears. After the song, the applause came like rain after drought. People stood embracing, laughing. Maggie tugged at her father's sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "I think Mom would have loved this." Eli knelt, meeting her eyes. "I think she's here every time we sing." Clara approached them, eyes bright with emotion. "You were incredible," she said. He looked at her. "So were you." She smiled. "So, about that promise." He blinked. "Promise. The one you never answered," she teased. "Sing this Beethoven and I'll marry you." He laughed, shaking his head. "You really remembered that some jokes turn out to be prophecies," she said. He met her gaze, the crowd still clapping behind them. "And what does this prophecy say?" Clara leaned in just enough for her voice to reach him through the noise. "It says, I already did, just not in the way people think. I married the music. The rest, we'll let time sing." Eli smiled, a look of quiet surrender and gratitude. "Then I'll keep tuning the song until it's ready." That evening, as the crowd trickled out, Clara walked through the empty hall. The piano still vibrated faintly from the last note. The air carried the mingled scents of dust perfume and candle wax. Eli joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. They sat on the edge of the stage, listening to the soft hum of the world beyond the glass windows. "I used to think success was noise," she said. "Applause, deals, motion. But it's this, isn't it?" He nodded. "It's always been this." She turned to him. "Eli, after everything, do you ever wonder if it was worth it?" He smiled gently. "Every sleepless night, every broken note. Because somewhere in the middle of all that noise we learned to listen again." A pause, long and full. Then she whispered, "Joy, beautiful spark." He looked at her eyes, warm. "You remember the lyrics? Hard to forget the song that changed my life." Outside, the city lights shimmered against the night. Inside, the last echoes of the children's laughter faded into peace. Eli's voice came soft, almost a prayer. "Joy isn't loud, Clara. It's a breath, the one you take when you finally stop running." She smiled. "Then let's not run anymore." They sat together in that stillness, 2 souls who had learned that sometimes the quietest moments hold the loudest truths. Through the windows, the sound of the city blended with the faint chorus of children rehearsing one last verse somewhere down the hall. And as the piano's final vibration melted into the night, the world outside kept listening, proof that some songs never end. Sometimes a song isn't just a melody, it's a reminder. A reminder that no matter where we come from or what title we wear, we all carry a voice waiting to be heard. Eli and Clara's story isn't about fame or redemption. It's about listening to pain, to silence, to the fragile sound of hope, learning how to breathe again. If you've ever witnessed a moment where kindness broke through the noise, where someone's simple act of courage changed everything, I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Tell us where you're listening from and what your song has taught you about life, love, or second chances. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear your voice too. And if this story moved, you don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss another journey like this one. Stories that heal, that remind us how human we still are. Thank you for spending this time with us, for feeling every note, every breath, every heartbeat of this story. Until next time, keep listening. Because sometimes the quietest moments sing the loudest.